All right, so I'm sitting here with Tyson Adams, and we're going to be talking about the Jhai Coffeehouse and everything coffee and how he just started up this amazing coffee shop. And I'm really excited to have him here at the Traveling Cup podcast. So welcome, Tyson, to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So you're tuning in now because it looks in the background here in this video that we're having here. I see the Nepalese or the Tibetan peace flags here, but you're tuning in from Seattle, correct?
Correct, yeah.
But you travel quite a bit, I imagine, between Laos and then the States?
Yeah. For the past 5.5 years, I've been back and forth and just returned from an 8-month stay in Laos.
Nice. Wow, that's amazing. Well, hopefully you tell us a little bit about that in the show. So cool. But the first thing, before we get anywhere, let's start off with the 6-word memoir. So what's your 6-word memoir as of today?
The 6-word memoir is "Failures are failures of the imagination."
Let's say that again. Failures are failures of the imagination.
Yes.
I love that. That's beautiful. All right, I'm writing that down. So since you're in Seattle, which is the coffee capital of the United States, if there is one. I mean, we have some great coffee here in New York City, but in Seattle, it's just, and I don't know if it's with the gray sky and everything during the winter, it just kind of makes it perfect, especially for writing. So I'm just curious. I see the French press beside you there. How do you brew your coffee, and then any tips that you'd like to share with us about how to make a great cup?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is using an AeroPress, but usually every morning I do just a French press. Mm-hmm. But I think the 2 tips that I have is the first one is that I use a really cool app. It's called Brew, and it's basically you just search Brew in the App Store. But what it allows you to do is you have essentially all the different types of brew methods, and then essentially you can click, like, for example, let's just say you do a press pot. So it allows you to look at the number of grams versus the number of water, or the amount of water that you would have, and you can do it in different ways. And so for me, I think it is specific, or it's better to have it be specific as far as the amount of coffee grams you're using in comparison to water. The other thing that I recommend as far as a cool coffee tip is there's a grinder called a Porlex. And it's made in Japan, but it's essentially a hand crank. I don't have it here with me now, or else I'd show it to you. But it is way better than just a normal coffee grinder, because it creates a very consistent grind. And when you're doing a drip coffee, or if you're doing a French press, you want it to be like sand. But usually grinders make it all different sizes, which definitely affects taste. So you have to crank it, like, I don't know, for like 3 or 4 minutes, but it's worth it because it makes it that much better.
I just had this image of myself on a flight with the AeroPress and then the Porlex, the hand grinder, and I'm sitting there and just asking for some hot water. So that's actually probably a really cheap alternative then to the really expensive burr grinders, right?
Yeah, and actually, as far as cupping coffee, it allows you to have the best quality grind. It's actually better than even professional grinders that you would have in a cafe. So, in my opinion, I mean, for $35, you can get yourself into an amazing grinder. It's just that you have to work a little every morning.
I'd be okay with that. That would be fine. I could do that after I have my morning handstand. So I'm going to have to check that out. Thanks, Tyson, for sharing that with us.
For sure.
Okay, so what was one of your favorite conversations? Now, I usually say what's a recent conversation that you have, but I think you have a really unique experience. So I'm just curious here. When I say what was one of your favorite conversations over a cup of coffee, what would you say?
So the thing that jumps into my mind is that I get the opportunity to go out and actually, sit in a farmer's home with them, like the actual coffee that we're purchasing, and then, of course, either bringing to America or brewing up, roasting, and then brewing up in the cafe. So I'm sitting in Laos in this farmer. His name is Mr. Sibunhang, and he's actually an amazing man. He's just one of those people that's just, I mean, I can't understand him because he only speaks Lao, so everything goes through our translator, but just his personality is, he's always just very smiley and nice. But I was actually sitting in his house, and we decided to basically brew up a little bit of his coffee and actually share it with him. And the reason why it was such an impactful conversation or amazing one is that he had never had his coffee in his entire life. He's essentially, I would say, close to 60 years old. His kids are as old as I am at 30. And the reality is that he's never actually tasted his own coffee brewed correctly. And so being able to sit there with him and his family and actually brew him up a cup of coffee and let him try his own coffee and see that smile on his face was a remarkable experience, because, he doesn't even know what the end product is of his own product, and yet he's the best coffee farmer in the entire this entire area. So it was a remarkable conversation, just hearing his expressions about how fruity it was and how interesting it was, and that the only coffee he'd ever had was basically just like instant coffee with a lot of cream and sugar in it. So that was really, really special.
That's so interesting. So I'm confused though. How does that happen? How does he grow the coffee beans, but yet how would he usually make them then? How would he usually make his cup of coffee?
It just kind of depends upon where you live in the world. Ethiopia, they've been growing their own coffee for 400 years, but they also drink coffee. Whereas Lao culture, they're a tea culture, so they don't drink their own product. And so one of the most important parts of helping farmers to grow better quality coffee is to connect the end product in their mind. So the point is that he had just never had his own coffee ever. And then some of the farmers that, actually do drink it once in a while, what they'll do is they'll just take it and put it in a wok and just cook it over the fire, which burns the hell out of it, and then they just brew it up and it tastes like shit. So to roast it properly and brew it properly allows for him to see and experience the uniqueness and the fruitiness of his cup, which is pretty cool.
Dude, that is so beautiful. And the reason I love that is because that's kind of the metaphor of how I came up with the traveling cup. I was reading a Zen koan called A Cup of Tea, and it talked about how all the things that go into a cup of tea, like the water and then the ceramic, and then the tea is shipped and then it's brewed by someone else, and it's this incredible process to get this simple cup of tea in front of you. And then so that's kind of analogous to a cup of coffee, and that's so beautiful that you were he's the one who created it, the creator, and then you're the end user, and you're actually sitting there literally in front of each other, but you're helping him really see the beauty in what he's creating. And wow, that's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that story, man.
Yeah, of course.
So let's see here. What book are you currently reading here? I'm curious.
Yeah, so the book I'm currently reading actually ties back into how I'm also trying to be a social entrepreneur and also be able to pay the bills. It's a book by Bruce Fife. It's called The Coconut Oil Miracle. And essentially, I have been on the coconut oil. I'm essentially a mini expert in coconut oil along with coffee now. But
do you ever put in your coffee?
Oh, yeah. I prefer to do MCT oil and grass-fed butter that's unsalted, because it's kind of like bulletproof coffee, it essentially is bulletproof coffee. But yeah, I'm a lover of coconut oil, and I'm actually starting a little side business importing coconut oil from Thailand and having my own private label. So yeah, so that's what I'm reading. Trying to become an expert and trying to learn as much as possible.
That's great. It's so random too that we're both talking about this, because putting coconut oil and then the grass-fed butter into the coffee is something that I've been doing every morning now too. And I've noticed, and I mentioned this in my last episode as well, my mental acuity, especially in the morning when I'm writing, is just crystal clear. I mean, usually I get up really early in the morning around 4 a.m. When before everyone else is up, and it's just a very clear, peaceful time for me to write. But then I added in the coconut oil, and I'm so focused. I love it.
Yeah, it's a cognitive enhancer, so it's going to make you, it's essentially, it bypasses your digestion, goes straight to your liver and detoxifies your liver, and that, of course, detoxifies your blood and gives it oxygen. And so it's essentially like the fats that you need for your brain to work. Your brain craves those fats, so it's like pure energy. In fact, they do these experiments where they take two mice and they give one coconut oil and the other one doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And the one with coconut oil can swim like twice as long as the other one.
Get out of here. Wow, that's crazy. So the only problem I've been having with the coconut oil and butter in my grass-fed butter in my coffee is after I put it in my Vitamix and whip it up into this, kind of like cappuccino thickness, I'll walk away, I'll come back, and my cat will be head first in the cup of coffee, licking the butter. So that's the only downfall for anyone with animals. They love it, but I'm sure it's healthy for them, or I think it is at least.
Of course. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'm hoping you could share with us a little bit about who a mentor of yours has been, and could we give a shout out to someone who's been a major influence for you?
Ooh, this is a tough one. I could go in a lot of different directions with this. I guess for this particular reason, I would say that I got to stick with AJ Leone. He's actually the founder of Misfit, him and his wife, Melissa. But AJ, he's kind of the one that jump-started Jhai Coffeehouse in a lot of ways, because essentially the Misfit community, they launched a campaign, or actually a contest, about a year and a half ago. And that contest was write up a business idea and who it's going to affect and how it's going to affect the world, and submit it to us, and we're going to select one person and make that dream come happen, or make that dream come true. Wow. And so I basically wrote a 9-page business plan for Jhai Coffeehouse, and I actually won that. And then, of course, that's what basically catapulted this entire project, and our ability to fundraise and get over there and build this awesome coffee shop. So he, has been a part of it since the beginning, and yeah, it's been awesome to have his support and the whole community's support. So yeah, I got a shout out to AJ.
I think Bernie Shung also mentioned him as well. I'm gonna have to meet this gentleman. Sounds like he's up to something incredible. So very cool.
For sure.
Actually, let's take. Well, you know what? I want to eventually get back into talking about what you're picking up and what you're learning from this book right now, because I think that's going to tie into a couple other topics we were hoping to get into today. So let's just kind of leave that up in the sphere, in the ether. But let's really dive in now and talk to our listener about Jhai Coffeehouse. I love this. Bernie Shung is the one who introduced me to it, so shout out to her. Hey, Bernie. And can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly led you to, before you even met AJ Leone and Misfit, what led you to want to create the Jhai Coffeehouse, and then tell us, of course, what it is from your end.
So I'll do a quick run through. So I went backpacking by myself 5.5 years ago. I just bought a one-way ticket to Southeast Asia, and I did a month in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And while I was in Laos, I was doing some dream journaling at the time, and I basically had this whacked out dream one night that I was going to import Lao coffee to Seattle and then provide education support back to the community that was actually growing that coffee. And at the time, I had never done any sort of philanthropy work. I'd never done anything coffee related. I'd never imported, exported. I'd never even built a business by myself or even tried. And so it was kind of a radical dream. And I had basically filled up about 10 pages in my Moleskine journal. And I went to the internet later that day and looked it up and saw that there was Lao coffee in the south of Laos. And so I went down there, met the community, and basically took some samples back to Seattle and then built a business out of it. So in the beginning, I was essentially importing Lao coffee and running it as a one bag, one book model, where I was basically selling the coffee in the local area and then providing a book back. And that was kind of the first about 2.5 years. And we ended up putting in 8 libraries from that. And that kind of is how Jhai Coffeehouse had its foundation, because I had the connection with the community. I had, a little bit of coffee knowledge, and then I started doing some philanthropy projects. And so that's kind of the foundation of how it began, before I was introduced to that contest that AJ, put out, and that's how Jhai Coffeehouse then began.
So let me just make sure that I'm clear here. And by the way, I love that you were dream journaling, because I still have, and I'm looking at them right now, there's 2 dream journals where I did that, and I would wake up and write them down, and I need to get back. I was actually just thinking of this yesterday too, so this is random that you kind of brought it up. But so you had a dream, you woke up, and you wrote about Jhai Coffeehouse, and then 5 years later, here you are talking to me, and Jhai Coffeehouse is a living, breathing, super successful thing.
Yeah, that's always the trip for me, because
it's amazing.
There's a lot of people are like, I'm going to build this business, and then they bring intellect to it, right? And they just push forward. But for me, it's been a little bit of an ego detachment, because it's kind of like I just follow this intuitive kind of imaginative dreamscape that, presented itself to me, and I've followed it without really knowing where it would lead. And of course, it's basically made me self-employed for 5.5 years, traveling the world and doing amazing things. And so, yeah, it's weird because everything, this podcast is a direct result of a dream, and everything really in my life today is now. So I think that it still is a weird concept because a lot of people just are not paying attention to that sort of landscape inside of themselves.
That's so interesting. So tell us then exactly what Jhai Coffeehouse is today. Is it a coffee shop where we can go to and could we order coffee from it? And could you maybe tell us about that?
So Jhai Coffeehouse, the way that I describe it is it's the world's first completely philanthropic coffee roaster and also cafe located at the source. And what that really means is that we essentially facilitate coffee tours. We roast our own coffee, so then we're a cafe, and then we also have food. And so there's tourists coming through. They're wanting to experience the coffee culture of Laos because they've read about it or somebody's told them about it. So they end up, basically landing in our artisan cafe that's quite beautiful. I'll just show you a quick picture. I have one here on my phone. And then what ends up happening is that we take all the profits from the cafe that the cafe generates, and then we basically reinvest that into clean water and hygiene for the kids. So we're essentially working directly with the actual schools in the area. And this is a picture of...
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a really kind of beautiful space in terms of it being a work of art. Hardwood floors, we designed all the furniture, low seating so that people sit down, communicate. There's no, distractions as far as a normal cafe. Like, it's not like a technology hub where everybody's just sitting on a computer working on things. It's just
like you would see in Silicon Valley or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're in the middle of rural Laos. So, so that's basically what we do. And so what ends up happening is that, we take those profits and we basically roll them back up into, actually drilling wells. And so the final product ends up being a situation where, we drill a well, we hire locals to actually, build the actual pumps. And then that's what we end up getting. So it's kind of one of those things where we saw a need and we're filling that need. And the need really comes from the fact that in Laos, diarrhea is the #2 killer of Lao children. Right. And so it's kind of like, okay.
And that's from not having clean water, right?
Yeah, it's a combination of not washing their hands and also not having clean water. Oh, sorry about that. My thing came unplugged for a second. So the thing is that basically, we saw a need. Kids weren't going to school because they were getting sick. They're having diarrhea. So why not just take coffee and do good with it instead of just take coffee and make profit off of it? So
that's great. That's amazing. So I'm just curious. Now you mentioned how Laos is a tea culture, right?
Yes.
So the people that usually come into the Jhai Coffeehouse, which is located in Laos, have you sort of turned that area into coffee drinkers, or is it mostly from people like myself who would come and visit Laos that go and visit?
Yeah, I mean, the profits from the cafe are mainly generated by tourists that are coming through. We see anywhere from 10 to, on a good day, maybe 40 customers a day. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. But then, yeah, the actual locals that are a part of the cooperative that we're assisting and aiding, they do their work from the cafe. So they have meetings. And so the village chiefs are often coming and we're serving them up their own coffee, which of course excites them. And they, they pour a bunch of milk and sugar in it because they don't like the taste, but at least it's fun anyways.
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah. So now can someone like myself order the coffee from there?
Yeah, we'll have an online store up shortly. We actually just brought over a half container of coffee it's in California actually, but it's a coffee company called Thanksgiving Coffee Company. And so we worked with them to purchase that coffee. They're a publicly traded company. They do, about $10 million in business a year, which is wonderful because they have the capacity to essentially bring in this coffee and market it. So I'm helping them right now to do that. And we're actually looking for coffee roasters around the country that are interested in taking 10 bags or 15 or 20 bags of this Lao coffee. So if anybody's out there that has a coffee roaster or knows one and is interested in Lao coffee, let me know. The two things that I should say about it is that first and foremost, it's the first Lao like specialty grade coffee ever in America. So that's really interesting because it's rare and it's exotic and nobody has ever had it.
I've never had Lao coffee, so I'm really excited to try some.
For sure, for sure. And the other thing is coffee's basically scored on a scale from 0 to 100, and so specialty grade kicks in around 80. This coffee scores anywhere from 85 to 86 and a half, so it's actually quite good. It's a luxury specialty grade coffee. You know, the best cafes in the country sell 90-point coffee, but it's just right under that. So it's really good stuff.
That's amazing. That's great. So that tune in, and we'll be able to shortly be able to order from there.
I will. And also, one thing, Mark, is I do anticipate having an online store connected to our website, and so you'll be able to go to our website and get that direct to. It's just not set up quite yet. Probably in the next month or so.
That's great. And there are actually quite a few coffee shop owners and coffee roasters that do listen. So I hope that they listen to what you're saying and then they reach out, because I would love to see this. And there's a few people that I want to connect you to too as well that I think you would appreciate.
Cool.
So let's step back into your shoes about 5 years ago, or maybe 4.5 years ago. What was one major obstacle that you overcame that you just really were not expecting?
Yeah, when I first started sourcing coffee, I was essentially buying coffee that was pre-roasted in Laos by essentially an older American guy, and he was buying it directly from the farm, roasting it in Laos, and then shipping it to me. And the first 2 tons of coffee showed up in Seattle, and it was great, good quality, everything went fine. Then I purchased another 3 tons from him, which was around $25,000. And when it arrived, he essentially completely ripped me off. He had purchased all the broken and bad beans from the cooperative, and he essentially just roasted it all up, shipped it, and it was basically disgusting. And it ended up having to be donated to a homeless shelter here in Seattle. But that was a huge hit. I mean, it was essentially everything that I had worked for it was about 2 years. Everything that I worked for went right down the drain. All the cash was gone, and I essentially had to basically scrap that model completely.
Oh my goodness, that's so sad. So
crazy.
Oh my god, that's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. So $25,000, and then some guy gave you the wrong or just terrible beans.
Yeah, and it was on purpose. I mean, he wasn't gonna essentially take any responsibility for his decision. It was definitely something where I'm always one of the things I learned from that is that there's times in life when you're doing business, or you have friends and you have intuition about certain people, and you are so, I guess, driven to make it happen that you kind of push your intuition away. And I think that if I were to rewind, I would have listened to that intuition, and I wouldn't have been so forceful to make that transaction happen, because ultimately, I did have a hesitation about it, but so I'm not the victim of that situation. I do believe that I co-created that and had a choice to do business with somebody that I wasn't really feeling that great about. So in some ways, it was a great learning lesson. It's like I got my MBA on the go without having to go to business school. And
well, think of it that way. It was a real world MBA, and that's only maybe half of a year at a good MBA school. So don't worry about it. So how did you end up recovering from that?
I started sourcing coffee locally from a roaster who was also doing coffee. It wasn't Lao coffee, but it was just a blend from Nicaragua and Guatemala, and I was basically doing the same model. So it ended up being okay, but it was just challenging to get back out of that hole. Yeah. So it ended up just turning into more of okay, I still want to do good work in Laos, so I just formed a 501c3 nonprofit instead. So then I started to do more fundraising as opposed to trying to sell coffee. Yeah.
So that's perfect then, because the one thing that I did want to talk to you about is I noticed that you've used Indiegogo as your crowdsourcing fundraising platform, and Indiegogo is the nonprofit version. I like to think of it this way, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the nonprofit version of Kickstarter.
Correct. Correct.
So, and yours was wildly successful, and I took a look at it. It's still up. You can take a look at it now if you were just to Google Jhai Coffeehouse Indiegogo, and you can take a look at the video that you made. And your hair is a little bit shorter in that video. So, could you just tell us a little bit of how Indiegogo helped you get the seed funding for the project?
Sure, sure. So in total, I've run 4 Indiegogos since Jhai Coffeehouse was essentially, conceived, and that's totaled around $25,000 raised. So the first one was for the actual cafe, so raising money for the cafe. The second two, or the second one was just raising money for a well to be built. The next one was raising money for holiday coffee, so people wanted coffee, they could buy it just for the holidays, and then the last one was also another water well. So in total, we've had great success with it all on Indiegogo. The first one though was amazing. The goal was 10,000, and we ended up hitting our stretch goal, which was 15,000.
Right.
And that was really the capital needed to essentially take an old rundown house and essentially rent it for $1,200 a year, super, super cheap, and basically do anything we wanted to it. So we ripped out the back wall, we built it a kitchen and toilets, we laid hardwood floors, we knocked out a few walls and put windows in, we knocked out another wall and put a door, and we built this beautiful artisan cafe and beautiful space that really is awesome. And so Indiegogo, was a huge part of that, and being able to provide rewards that allowed for the community to step into sharing in that success. And then the other really important piece of that is that once you build that out, we were essentially sharing that story in real time. That's the most important part of any sort of entrepreneurial venture that you're going to start or create. You share the vulnerability of being, in Laos, project managing Lao people that you can barely understand and dealing with all the hardship that creates. It was very challenging. Sure. And so to have the community following along on Facebook and through emails was really great, because whenever we would have challenges or problems, we would use the community as our sounding board. So giving them voice, but also taking their feedback and implementing it.
So a couple questions then about the community. 2 questions. Number one, did you have a community of fans before you did the Indiegogo?
Yeah, when we first started Jhai Coffeehouse, we had, I think, around 700 or so people on Facebook, and around, I would say about 500 people on email. And then that's grown now to over 7,000 on Facebook, and I think around 800 or something around there on email. So following and building out the online side of things, and just, I don't know, it just kind of takes off, because people share it, and it ends up being really great.
Right. Well, it's a great story, so I'm sure it's not too difficult to share. Yeah. So did you use, then the second question is, did you use Facebook and the groups in Facebook to talk to your community when you were over there and, like you said, living the entrepreneurial journey, or what did you use to communicate with your community?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook is usually the platform that I prefer. It's kind of like Twitter is a cocktail party and Facebook's a family reunion, and so you
What's LinkedIn then?
Oh, LinkedIn's probably like a formal dinner or something with tuxedos.
Right, black tie event.
Yeah, black tie event. But the thing is that, I would say that Facebook was a great platform, because I would like to have more community built into our website and actually have that, but it's not as viral. It doesn't share quite as easy, and I like everybody to just stay in there. So, like, for example, when I would put up a post or blog post or whatever, I would boost it for $1. So I'd put essentially $1, and that would allow for that to sit in people's news feeds a lot longer. So there was certain pieces of content or stories that I would write up that, maybe 500-600 people would end up liking, because they actually read through it and get, 40, 50 comments. And I thought that was really interesting. You really can't get that out of a blog feature or out of just a blog post. So that was kind of my strategy, as far as social media is concerned, to get a lot of eyeballs to the content and to get the community feeling like they were a part of something that was evolving every day.
I think too, one of the beautiful things is you were able to share a lot of pictures too, right?
Yeah.
And almost like a live feed rather of what's going on there.
Correct.
So now this is a question that I'm just, if you are comfortable talking about, I'd appreciate it. So since now Jhai Coffeehouse is an entirely social purpose venture, and that means, I think you said it, 100% of the business profit go to the project. How exactly then, the question is, I guess, how do you fund your life? Where does your source of income come from?
Yeah, so that's kind of a tricky question, but to spell it out, I have learned a lot of just essentially online skills by building my own businesses.
Yeah.
So on the side, I've done a lot of just little projects here and there to help build websites for people or do some branding and that kind of thing. So like the last big project I did was I'm a rock climber, and so I was connected to a rock climbing community that was building a rock climbing gym in Park City, Utah. So essentially I did the name, the brand, the website, the social media, and helped them get their business off the ground so that when they opened the doors, they had 1,000 people on their Facebook ready to come in the gym and sign up for memberships. So that's kind of what I've learned just by being a social entrepreneur that now I can essentially take and have it as a marketable skill.
Right.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm now in the process of I am in the process of building a coconut oil business, a private label coconut oil business, importing coconut oil from Thailand, and then essentially doing it as a private label right onto Amazon. So you'll be able to get the highest quality coconut oil in the world here shortly, and it'll be a really great label. And I've kind of I would say I haven't done it in practice, but I have launched an ebook that is done pretty well on the health benefits of coconut oil. But this project is it's a physical product, and that's where ultimately you can create a passive income stream where, you can pay yourself without actually having employees, and Amazon can fulfill all that for you. So that's really my goal right now personally, is to create an income so that I can travel the world to Jhai Coffeehouse and back without needing to go get a paycheck every day.
That's great. Now, so let's then go back to that book that you're reading, and if you mind saying the title again of it.
Yeah, it's the Coconut Oil Miracle.
And that talks a little bit about how to create a profitable social purpose venture, right?
No, the Coconut Oil Miracle is just essentially the scientific health benefits of coconut oil. So that's just, I'm reading that just to essentially immerse myself in the way in which I should go brand myself in order to essentially appeal to the most amount of people. So I do lots of blog sort of diving and just reading in order to kind of create that business model. So it's not tied to the book at all.
Okay. Well, that's great, though. I can't wait to see what you do with the coconut oil. I'm a huge proponent of it. My wife as well. She uses it for pretty much everything. We go through a lot of coconut oil here in the house, and it's actually it's funny. A lot of people know that I use it, and so one time I had a student of mine. This was a couple of years ago, and he comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Mr. Guay." He goes, "Do I look different?" And I go, "Nick, I'm not sure what's going on." And he's like staring at me like right in my face, and he's this big man, really, big muscular guy, but he's shinier. And he goes, "I have coconut oil all over." And his hair was slicked, and it was all on his face, and he smelled of the coconut oil, and it was like his thing that he did for a week, and then he kind of just went to go using it, for more not so crazy, but.
Yeah, I'll tell you one really important thing that I've learned because I've been to factories now. So basically, not all coconut oil is created equal, and the world doesn't know that yet. So what happens is when you have 10 coconuts and you pull them out of a tree, usually 1 or 2 coconuts is rancid. So what they do is they crack it open and they lay it out in the sun, and it dries, and it basically grows bacteria and mold. So what they do is they process the 8 good coconuts and then the 2 bad coconuts, and then they're essentially to cut costs, they're doing blends. So most coconut, I would say 99% of coconut oil that exists out there is a blend. So it's essentially an 80-20 or 70-30 blend of good coconuts and bad coconuts. So when you're getting your coconut oil and it has a strong coconut flavor, a strong coconut taste or smell, and is a little bit of a yellow tint when it's in liquid form, that is actually the bacteria that's trapped because of those rancid coconuts. And so I've essentially found a supplier that has 100% only good coconuts. So basically the taste and the smell is almost so mild that it doesn't affect really anybody, even if people don't like coconut, and it's like completely clear in liquid form. And so it's actually the most purest form as far as applying it to your skin, and also, eating it, it won't change your food as much. And so it's a really great product. So I'm super stoked about it.
Now, do you use it in your cleaners as well?
Yeah, I mean, as far as wiping off counters or tables or whatever, I mean, it's like totally fine. There's so many purposes for it. I mean, oil pulling is something I just started doing recently, which has been pretty cool. But I've been basically applying it to my face and my skin for 3 years. I don't use any sort of lotions or any sort of acne cleaners or anything like that.
Yeah. I know in our household, there's someone that my wife likes to watch, like Holistic Habits is a YouTube video. This woman, she does all these videos of how to do coconut oil. And so in our home, we have a lot of homemade deodorants, homemade cleaners that my wife will create with the coconut oil. And I love it. It's great. So, all right, cool, man. Well, I'm looking forward to you when you produce your private label. I'll definitely be your first customer along with other traveling cuppers to check it out. So what is one goal for the future of the Jhai Coffeehouse here before we sign off?
So I'm headed back in October to hopefully I have three volunteers lined up, and hopefully that all works its way out. So when we land, we're going to be doing a few different things. Ideally, we want to put in 12 water wells this year, so that'll bring a lot of clean water into a lot of different villages. We're also going to be doing coffee education in almost all the villages. So essentially, there's going to be about 17,000 families that will end up getting coffee education, which of course improves quality and has the ability for them to increase their earning potential. And then I'm working with Thanksgiving to build out the marketing here in the US so that the demand is increasing, because it's not important to increase coffee quality and education if you don't have a demand to actually buy that coffee at a higher price point. So those are kind of what I'm working on right now. And one of the things that I think would be really cool in the future that I am going to be working with, hopefully with the Misfit community on, is to actually purchase our own $20,000 water drilling rig. And when you do that, you then cut out the middleman of having to hire somebody who, of course, inflates the price each year. And then you essentially are a mobile water drilling company. The thing that we make sure that we do is we don't want to create dependence in the communities that we work with. So we actually require every village to co-invest 15% of the project costs. So they end up having to pool the money from each individual family in order to bring that cash to the table. So when you put in a $1,700 or $2,000 water pump, they end up putting in $200-$300 into the cost, which is a lot of money for these families. And so in the future, what we would like to have is our own rig, so that we could just show up to a village and say, hey, all you need to do is buy the actual machine, or not the machine, but the actual pump or the electric water drilling machine. I guess it is a machine. And then we'll drill it for you for free. So it allows for us to do more good in a sort of non-limiting way. We can essentially scale infinitely.
So that's awesome. I can't wait to see that. And I just, because one thing I really loved about your site, by the way, the Jhai Coffeehouse, is your logo and your site is just really cool. The way, whoever the graphic designers were that you worked with, I could see it, on the water rig right there when you guys own one. So how can our listeners help you out, Tyson?
Link up onto the Facebook page. I think that's the most important thing for now, because ultimately we're going to be driving our coffee store through that. And then if this is interesting at all, like I always basically commit to, after these podcasts, I always commit to responding to anybody and everybody, as far as if you just want to email me direct, meaning if you just want to say hello, or if you want to, if you have an idea or if you have a question, just shoot it to me. And, my email is tyson@jhaicoffeehouse.com. So that really is something that I like to have more personal communication with any new person that might be listening on your show.
That's great. I know we have a lot of listeners too in the Seattle area, because I get some emails with photos, and sometimes in our Facebook group too, of people at the shops in Seattle, just showing the little setup that they have, if they have a cool little picture in their cappuccino or something like that. So hopefully you'll be able to get some nice coffee shop conversations out of this too. And that's one of my favorite things about running this show is I love when people meet or listen to someone else on the show, and then they start talking on the Facebook group, and then the community grows, and then they actually meet in person, and it's this really beautiful thing that would never happen 20 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago in the dial-up time.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Let's go back really quick. What does Jhai mean? We forgot to talk about that.
Yeah, Jhai is a Lao word. It means heart, so it's essentially coffee from the heart. So they go by the Jhai Coffee Farmers Cooperative, and that's basically it's about 2,400 families that basically are living in 63 different villages. So we essentially represent them, and so yeah, Jhai means heart. So
that's beautiful. So, Tyson, thank you so much for coming on the Traveling Cup podcast. The world is definitely going towards a greater tomorrow because of you, my friend. So thank you so much for your work. When I first heard about the Jhai Coffeehouse from Bernie Shung, I loved it, and I was taking a look at it, and I was so looking forward to when we were finally able to speak. So I'm really thankful for this moment to be able to talk to you. So keep up the great work. Can't wait for the coconut oil, and keep in touch, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.
Yeah.
End recording. All right, cool. So Let me just check that out really quick. I just noticed we didn't say the website, but you know what? You said at jhaicoffeehouse.com, and I'll make sure to put the website on the Traveling Cup as well, so they'll be able to find it.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, cool. So how do you think that went?
Yeah, it went great. I mean, you never know what you're going to get when you get into these podcasts, and I didn't think I'd be talking about coconut oil, but it's been what's on my mind right now.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to talk about coconut oil either, but I'm not kidding you. Just yesterday was the first day I put coconut oil in my coffee, and with the grass-fed butter, and so this morning I said to my wife, I was like, "Hey, did you put the coconut oil in the coffee?" And she goes, "Yeah, I did. I like it." So I didn't think we were going to talk about that either, but that's kind of one of the beautiful things of when you sit down, you just have a coffee shop conversation,
For sure, for sure.
So, is there any way, by the way, I wanted to mention to you, is there any way that I can directly help you with what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, if you have any...
I do want to introduce you to someone, but you finish and then I'll tell you who it is.
Yeah. If you have any like actual coffee roasters, small coffee roasters that are interested in some higher grade Lao, organic coffee, hit me up with their contact details, or just send an email introduction, because essentially we have about 143 bags sitting in Oakland, and we need to sell.
Beans, you need to roast them, or are they roasted?
They're green. Okay. But at the same time, if you also know people that have coffee shops that want roasted coffee, like they're full scale roasters, so they could essentially do roasted coffee with